There's another question I think that's also interesting to ask. If Syria would be kind of like the umbrella corporation that would kind of manage everything in Lebanon, would Hezbollah also accept that kind of new dynamic? Because Hezbollah right now has been waging war in Syria and other countries. And a lot of people might say that they have become even more powerful than the Syrian regime within Syria. Like they're kind of calling the shots. Would that kind of switch be accepted by Hezbollah leadership, you think?
The idea among some Arab states, like Jordan and Egypt, is that if you pull Syria closer to the Arabs, closer to Saudi, closer to the Gulf, closer to that fold, you can pull them away from Iran, right? And so what does Hezbollah think of that as an organization that openly receives all of its funding from Iran, its weapons, its support?
It's oil.
It's oil, and now our oil, by the way. I mean, like, I am no Hezbollah expert, but I think that it's an interesting question. I mean, what does Hezbollah make of this reorganization, perhaps? I don't know how much it changes, in the short term.
Let's hope for the best, basically.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, they have shown themselves to be the most competent actor, right? I mean, that's clear. They've had, during the protests, they suffered a lot, at least in the public sphere in terms of rhetoric. The untouchable was suddenly touchable. People were cursing, the head of Hezbollah in public. They were clearly saying that they are one of them, right? واحد منهم, which was unthinkable.
Unthinkable.
Yeah, completely unthinkable. But I think that recently they've been doing much better. The Iranian thing, for example, I mean, just think of this PR coup. Like Hezbollah's reasoning, what they say is the reason for Lebanon's crisis is hisar, a siege, right, of the country by the West and by France and, not by France, by Europe, but by the Western
embassies,
states, right?
The axis of evil,
And so, I mean, from a Hezbollah perspective or a Hezbollah supporters perspective or anyone's perspective, really, if you have Nasrallah coming out and saying, I'm getting fuel from Iran, and then the next day, the American ambassador says, listen, we can get you fuel as well, kind of looks like you're lifting a siege, doesn't it? I mean, it's sort of a PR win, I think, for Hezbollah there. And you could even argue they have a point. I mean, if all of this time Lebanon needed the power and it wasn't getting it, and Nasrallah threatens to bring Iranian fuel, and suddenly we can get the power, and it was that easy. I mean, it's sort of proving your point, right? The other thing was the explosion in Akkar, the explosion that killed more than 30 people. After that, the state, as usual, absent. The parties in the area, absent. Hezbollah gave a donation, I believe, of 1 billion lira, which, God, what is that today on the exchange rate? I don't know. But I think tens of thousands of dollars at least, to the families of the victims. This is sort of like breaching a line in Lebanon that, like, usually you're not even supposed to think can be breached between a Shia party giving Sunnis in Akkar aid, right? And that's sort of what Hezbollah there is saying, sort of, we are not this sectarian party that only looks out for our community. We, in fact, look at us here, we're giving money to the victims of this blast. And again, fair point, like these people are super underprivileged. They received very little state help afterwards, and suddenly they're provided millions of liras in aid from Hezbollah. And then with the fuel, when the Iranian fuel actually arrived, I watched Al-Manar for a bit. I wouldn't recommend watching it for too long. I watched Al-Manar for a bit, and they had an advertisement if you wanted to get this Iranian fuel, right? And I noticed that they had numbers for every region in Lebanon. If you're in Kasserwan and you want Iranian fuel, you can order it on this number.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, you can order it on this number. I didn't call the number, so I don't know if it works. But at least from again, this sort of idea of, no, we are not getting this Iranian fuel just for our people, ببحلبك وبجنوب. No, we are, in fact, it's there for anybody who wants it, right? And I think that they've sort of, again, they've shown themselves to be the competent actor. They actually, sort of seem to know what they're doing at this point.
Okay, so they're basically falling back in people's good graces. Although